Chad Moyer with you here on the Rural Radio Network, and it is time for another Fridays in the Field segment brought to you by FNBO, the Great Big Small Bank. And we are back in North Bend, Nebraska. We're visiting with Nick Emanual. Nick, thanks for taking the time and being here again today. Last time that we talked, about 6 weeks ago, we were right on the heels of a storm that had gone through the North Bend area. Have the crops recovered? How are things doing since then?
Yeah, so right at that time we had some significant wind damage and pivots blown over, but fortunately enough all the crops came through. No damage or any other after effects from those storms, and things are looking really good right now.
All right, so let's get the update. As we stand here in the third week in July, how are the crops looking?
Yeah, so for the most part, crops are looking really good. We're right in a pocket that isn't receiving too much rain. We just had about 7,500 hundredths on Monday, but that's the first rain we've had in a while. The soil moisture levels are pretty dry, so we had been irrigating pretty heavily up until the rain on Monday or Tuesday there. Corn's right, started tasseling about a week and a half ago. For the most part, all the fields are tasseled in this area and moving into that R1, R2 phase. Soybeans are anywhere from R1 to R3 and even pushing R4 in some phases. So most part, crops are looking really good. Even for the drier conditions we've had, dry land is hanging on and looks really good. That 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half in different areas really helped that dry land. And if we could catch another inch or two in the next week or so, that's really going to help the dryland farm also.
Yeah. So far, the soil profile has held up its end, you might say, in keeping the crops adequately watered. But we're kind of on a border right now?
We are right on the border. Like I said, we started watering pretty heavily on the irrigated because we had it. Typically when you hit the reproductive stage for corn, it starts really pulling water and the average daily use increases quite a bit. But the dryland crops were still hanging on even though we were watering heavily in that irrigated acres.
Just compare it to historical as far as crop advancement. Are we on schedule, ahead, behind? How are things comparing to years past?
I'd say we're probably right about average. If you look at the 10-year averages for GDD, growing degree days, there isn't much difference. I think we're plus or minus 10% on most fields in that situation. So on average, I think we're right there. And that was kind of a quick catch-up too, because last time we talked, crops, even though we got exceptional planting conditions, they got a kind of a slower start followed by some cool conditions. So right now, the heat in the last few weeks in June there really accelerated the crop and it was able to catch up.
Let's talk about bugs first of all. As you're out and about walking the fields, corn or beans, seeing any insect pressure right now?
Fortunately, pretty minimal right now. Disease and insect is not bad. Most people are applying fungicide pretty heavily right now, more preventive than curative right now. So you'll see a lot of fungicide planes flying on both corn and soybeans. But we've been fortunate enough, early mid-June, the Japanese beetle started to show up pretty heavily, but it does not seem to be bothering the soybeans and the corn very heavily at all yet. So we're pretty fortunate there. Just yesterday, our crop scout did identify some gall midge in one of our fields. Very specific case, location-wise and field-wise. Hadn't spread too bad, but did identify some there as well as a neighbor's field. So it is something to be looking out for.
Yeah. And on just an aside on the soybean gall midge, that is new for this area, I understand, huh?
Yes, fairly new. I haven't seen many reported cases for Dodge County. There was some down in southeastern Nebraska here about a month ago, but definitely something to be aware of and be looking out for in the rest of eastern Nebraska.
Okay. How about diseases? Have they flared up at all?
No, again, we've been fortunate. I know I've seen some southern rust was reported down in southeastern Nebraska again also, and they said to be aware moving north. But right now we are sitting fairly well, and I don't know if that's part of our management program. We sprayed fungicide early around that V5 to V6 stage of corn, so that really seems to be pulling it through right now.
Mm-hmm. All right. I guess what is the priority from here on out now? Since the crops are, kind of at average, like you said, they're doing well on moisture. Could use a little bit, but what do you think it's going to take to get the crops in this area all the way to full yield?
Water will be the big thing. Irrigating heavily, like I said, that 3/4 of an inch we had, that will only hold us till the end of the week. Plan is to start the pivots again Friday, especially with the heat that's coming through. And depending on what the forecast does, it'll be probably hot and heavy irrigating here to really push those yields to the potential.
All right. Just want to talk a little bit about your CropMetrics business as well, because that plays into this whole decision-making model as well. How are you using that information to finish out the season?
Yeah, great question. So CropMetrics is a precision irrigation company focused on identifying optimal times for irrigation recommendations and scheduling. And right now, that's really what we've been relying on is the soil moisture probes in the field to tell us when to water and how much to water. And that varies field by field and crop by crop. It was really interesting seeing just a week ago when the corn really started to pull that water heavily, moving into reproductive stage, whereas the beans really wasn't using that soil moisture at all. So even though we were experiencing drier conditions, the beans didn't need irrigating. And I know a lot of people were irrigating, but it just kind of shows you the advantage of the technology to be able to push those beans up to the reproductive stage later in their growth cycle.
Nick, sounds good. Like we say, we're on the path to what should be pretty decent yields around here, I would imagine. Thanks for the update, and we'll talk to you again in 6 weeks, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Chad.
Again, we've been visiting with Nick Emanual from North Bend, Nebraska. He is our Fridays in the Field farmer here in Dodge County. And Fridays in the Field brought to you by FNBO, the Great Big Small Bank. Here on the Rural Radio Network, Chad Moyer reporting.